we are bidding a goodbye to the year 2025 and welcoming in the new year. On the last day of the year 2025, Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered his New Year address where he revealed the country's economic, social, and technological development, addressed the key issues around national security and global governance, and laid out the country's direction for the year 2026. So what are China's most significant achievements for 2025? What does that mean for everybody else? And what challenges and opportunities may lay ahead for the coming year? Let's bring in our panelists. For more, we have in Singapore Professor Bert Hofman from the National University of Singapore. He's the former country director for China of the World Bank. In Kuala Lumpur, Peter Tian, former deputy director of the Institute of China Studies at the University of Malaya. And also in Beijing, Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. And last but not least in Beijing, Rong Ying with us in the studio, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute for International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. I should say Happy New Year to every one of you. So if I could ask, what might be the keyword you have in mind after listening to the speech by Chinese President to welcome the new year for the year 2025, and why? What would you say? Let's go with Professor Rong in the studio. One word, explain why.
Well, I guess I would say resilient, right? I think as we were bidding farewell last year, 2024, we were expecting something very extraordinary for the year 2025 because President Trump was going to take,
All right, so
yeah.
Resilience is the word. Let's
That's
go
right.
to the others. Peter, what's yours?
Well, for me, it's DeepSeek. It's just a confirmation of China's emergence as a technological superpower.
All right, Bert.
Look, I wanted to go with resilience, but that's taken now. So I think at the international level, I think we're looking at much more fragmentation. And so the world economy has been resilient, but underlying the fragmentation of trade and politics is quite persistent.
I see. John?
I would use the word multipolarity. I think 2025 is decidedly the year that the United States steered unipolarity of the international order has officially ended, as announced by President Trump's national security strategy document.
All right, very interesting. Of course, in the New Year address delivered by Chinese President, he's been talking about China making great achievements, meeting the target of the 14th five-year plan, and also make specific progress toward the journey of Chinese modernization. Among many of the points he mentioned, certainly is the Chinese economy. Bert, we have seen both the IMF, Asia Development Bank, other financial commercial institutions such as Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank have all raised their expectation for China's economic performance this year, 2025. Do you see this is a realization after many twists and turns?
Well, look, I think everybody was a bit more pessimistic in the beginning of the year, not least because of the announced measures by President Trump. China has been very resilient in reacting to those measures, and exports have been a big driver of economic growth against expectations, if you want. Second, even though domestic demand is not doing great, it's not disastrous either. So together, the 5% growth that Xi Jinping announced seems now entirely feasible. Every of the organizations still a little bit lower, but Xi Jinping announced 5% this year.
Right. Of course, consumption, real estate, and many of the issues related to local government, that still needs to be resolved. John, what do you make of the current reality? Is it going to lay a okay foundation or a quite stable foundation for those issues to be handled 2026?
Well, I think first of all, I would like to say that we are still on target to achieve the 5%, about 5% GDP growth rate objective. We are on target for delivering that. But nevertheless, I think the entire 2025 has been characterized by the concern of the anemic performance of many sectors here in China, particularly in the real estate property sectors. But nevertheless, I think starting from now, there are some signs of things going for the better. Particularly, I'm talking about the PMI number just announced for November. It's the first time more than 50% since I think about a year ago. And that's a very significant development. And I hope that this momentum can be carried out into the new year. And I think if after 3 or 4 months of continuous expansion, even though it's very very moderate expansion, I think it bodes very well for the rest of the year for 2026.
All right, Peter, of course, China's trade has already reached more than $1 trillion US dollars. That has created quite a stir in the international community. Some say this is great progress despite of tariff war. Others say, where is China going to be? And even next year, is it going to be such a gigantic, trading nation? Where is going to be the place for all of us? So, Peter, your take on that?
Yeah, there are two drivers on this tariffs, this trade surplus. One is, of course, the tariffs, and there's a lot of rechanneling of trade to this part of the world. And the other one is the digital economy that has really accelerated and that increased trade as well. I think moving forward, really, for us here in Southeast Asia and ASEAN, we really want to see increased domestic consumption within China, and that the market in China itself will open up further for us, and that will probably help to address some of the imbalances in the trade.
We are seeing Mr. Rong here sitting in the studio. The free trade port in Hainan certainly has become such a great news at the end of the year 2025. How much sincerity does it really show to the rest of the world about China's opening up efforts and making sure that China will be a great place not only for product consumption coming from all over the world, but also a great place for the rest of the world to think about putting China as part of their own global supply chain and their own starting point of seeking something new in their economy?
Yeah, definitely. I think the decision to sort of making Hainan, the whole island, the free trade port or free trade zone is significant, and I think also courageous. And then in some sense, it demonstrated the Chinese government the sort of efforts to ensure that the opening up and the particular reform, institutional reform, is going to not only, I think, would make Hainan Island as a test ground, but most importantly, I think, to gain experience so that it would be sort of used in mainland China. And I have seen, of course, there's a kind of a rush and a lot of speculations how, even average Chinese, and of course, that can be used that. But the most important signal or messaging is that China is ready. China really want to be opened up and serious of opening up and reform, to push for sort of deepening the reform, which is very
Bert,
much
we have seen the search for the best mechanism around the world when the world is facing quite difficulties economically and also when it comes to trade, as to what might be the best approach. Which one is having the best approach so far? How can we learn from one another? How much do you think China is really providing the rest of the world with some reference, whether when it comes to dealing with poverty, comes to dealing with opening up, comes to deal with tariff war, what comes to deal with what does new technology mean for the economy?
Well, look, I think China has been the greatest development success in our generation, and therefore, by itself, it is a great example. It is a very particular example. China came from very particular origins and developed from that. So it's hard to duplicate in other countries. But what I think is important that we see now is that China continues to emphasize multilateralism, openness, the things that the West used to stand for, and now at least the United States no longer seems to be on board. That's important for development. And China is walking the talk. You see now a lot of investments coming from China, particularly in Southeast Asia, where it's very welcome. And so it's a strengthening of the regional supply chains that we see. And of course, the institutional framework there is really quite solid with RCEP, with CPTPP, with the ASEAN-China free trade. So the institutional underpinning is also there, which is increasingly faltering globally with the WTO.
John, your thoughts?
Well, I keep thinking about this $1 trillion trade surplus you just mentioned. I think for certainly this represents a great success of China's trade exports. But I think we have to keep in mind that free trade is something that is increasingly being sort of ignored and pushed back by a lot of Western countries, and China is probably the only country that is still upholding this banner. And certainly, I think a large trade surplus is something that's of a concern, and we try to alleviate this problem. We try to alleviate it by increasing imports, by increasing FDI into other countries. But remember, there was a time in Chinese history when we did have a trade deficit, when United Kingdom tried to sell things into China, and they did this by essentially invading China. Today's China didn't do that. We certainly we like to sell more things into Europe, and we are not happy to see these trade barriers being set up by the European Union for exports going into the European Union market. But nevertheless, we are not like the Brits about 100 years ago.
What you're saying reminds me of an important question. That is, what does that mean, what we're having in the year 2025 for 2026? Does it mean we're likely to have more dialogues and discussions, or does it mean we're likely to have more conflicts when it comes to economy, trade issues? Bert?
Well, look, one of the hopeful signs is that there is going to be a Xi Jinping-Donald Trump summit, and that may solve part of the issues. Second, I do think that
part of the
there's a
issues
lot
for
of
China-US, or part of the issues for the rest of the world as well?
Well, particularly China-US. For the rest of the world, there's a lot of diplomatic activity going on now. Basically, as the United States has stepped back from its very prominent role for 80 years, it has stepped back, and now everybody's looking for an alternative. The regional agreements are there, but also Singapore, for instance, taking the lead to put together a coalition of middle countries to present a new framework for international trade and investment that would at least support the WTO goals as they used to be in the past. So I think we see a lot of those developments coming to fruition in the next year.
Ian, what do you think? Is it going to be more dialogues and discussions, or likely to be more conflicts? Mr. Rong?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I think we are going to definitely see more conversations, more cooperation, but in the meantime, more competition and possible conflict. After all, I think the Ukraine crisis has not ended, even though the talks for ceasefires and others have been on and off. And also, I think even in Gaza, I think despite the deals, I think the process of reconstruction has not been there. Even in China's, neighborhood, we are grateful that as we are bidding farewell to the 2025, the conflict, the boundary dispute, border dispute conflict between Cambodia and Thailand has concluded, but we do not know whether it would be,
right.
How far it will be going, and not to mention India and Pakistan, Afghanistan. So there are a lot of conflicts, and that would also take a lot of efforts. China, certainly, mediation, but the regional countries, ASEAN and others.
Indeed, but what about trade and economic issues? We're likely to see ministerial meeting, John, next year in the WTO once again. Meanwhile, while China and the United States might have more opportunities to have their leaders face to face on different occasions, we are still seeing a world in transition. What does that mean for everybody, especially when the trade mechanism is being questioned or in the process of transformation? And at the same time, we are seeing an interesting trend, which is Global South, the rise of it, and the within Global South trade and economic ties ever increasing. So all of these are very interesting questions that may help us to find the answer. More dialogue or more conflicts? John, before I go to Peter.
Yeah, well, Tian, you raised a lot of issues here. Let me
Indeed.
address one by one. I think, first of all, on the WTO issue, I think at least China and the European Union on the same side. Both sides are very much interested in continuing this mechanism. We will not see WTO go down the drain, even though Washington seems to be, at least on the surface, seems to be abandoning it, if not trying to sabotage it. On the trade side, I think I'm not so much concerned about the bilateral trade between China and the United States. I think both leaders have already talked over this issue when they were in South Korea
All right.
a few months ago, and there was a truce for 1 year. So I think up until now, at least Washington has been pretty much keeping its promise. But I do worry about the trade relationship between China and the European Union. There seems to be some frictions there, and then hopefully, I mean, unfortunately, this issue is very much hijacked by the Ukraine conflict, which is totally unwarranted in my view. But that's another subject. And finally, about the trade with the global south, as you just mentioned, I think it's all going up north. I think it's all good news from China's perspective. I think this relationship is going to continue to flourish. Chinese products are finding to be increasingly attractive to a lot of customers around the world, and I think that this relationship between the global south and China is only going to get better.
Okay, there are a lot of trends going on, Peter, as we mentioned. Are these likely to become eventually mega trends, or these are just the prelude to the real thing coming up? To your opinion, what is it?
Well, I think it is going to be a mega trend. The Global South is really coming together right now. I mean, we just had a very, very successful inaugural trilateral summit in Kuala Lumpur between ASEAN, the GCC, and China. These are all the building blocks of multilateralism. And Global South, ASEAN as a whole, are really committed to free trade. We want to open up our doors. We want to engage more partners beyond the region itself. We really see these are the building blocks of a future trend where there will be more engagement between the countries and regions and the blocks as well. So this is it. This is a new future for us in the Global South.
Yeah. Many Bert have been asking what's likely to be the relations as the Global South becoming ever stronger between the Global North, so to speak, and the Global South, so to speak.
Well, one can debate the definition, of course, but I do think that there is. I talked about fragmentation, and I do see that split between North and South coming much more prominent. But even within the South, I think it's not all happy camping. There's real issues, and one of the issues you mentioned yourself. China's been extremely successful in exporting, but not so successful in importing. As a matter of fact, over the past 5-6 years, import have not gone up. So a lot of countries in the South see this as a threat, and they see China's success as potentially shortcutting their own development and their own industrialization. So I think a lot of dialogue needs to happen to get this on the right track. Between East and West, the issues are a bit different. I heard, I'm European, so I know how big Russia's invasion of the Ukraine has been for Europe, and how important it is for Europe to defend itself, not just militarily, but also economically. And that has consequences, unfortunately, for economic relations.
All right. Ying, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think China is clearly aware of these problems that are arising not because of China, but because of the size of China, Chinese economy, and in particular on the question of the $1 trillion US dollar, surplus. That's why I think BRI comes into play. Ever since the idea, to push for high quality development of BRI, and also I think emphasizing
Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
other words, China
that's right.
providing more investment elsewhere in the world
Definitely,
to build
yeah.
infrastructures,
Yeah.
particularly for the global south. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, definitely. We have seen actually even this year, 2025, China making efforts in pushing along the line. The for example, the Tanzania railway, the Tadara railway, which I have privileged and worked in one of the countries, Tanzania, 30 years ago, has been revitalized. And the idea to revitalizing that railway is to build a corridor for economic and development. And there are others I think need to be done so that Chinese investment and the environment for investment will become better, so that more and more Chinese sort of FDIs, Chinese enterprises, private ones in particular, will feel comfortable to help them, help these countries to achieve development.
Right. Peter, what do you think? We are talking about two things, but there is so much linked as well. Whether China is going to do its own things well within the country, well, at the same, because of its size, because of its importance in the world, how much and in what way is it going to contribute? Not only in economics and trade, but also in terms of global governance and many other areas, the same question can be asked. Your thoughts?
Let me give you an example of a very successful joint venture between China and Malaysia, which is the Geely and the Proton automobile joint venture. It has worked fantastically well. Geely has brought in technology that we do not have, and it has created a lot of jobs, and it has also opened up our transition towards EV. And this is the kind of cooperation. China has the overcapacity, and it needs a place to park all this overcapacity. But countries like Malaysia needs it, and we are ready to receive it. And that is really a win-win joint venture cooperation, where there is a market ready to receive Chinese technology, and there is also a space for technological transfer. So I think there are opportunities for that kind of synergy and growth moving forward. And the point is that I think China needs to really open up its market. It needs to really boost its domestic consumption, and that will really help Southeast Asians' trade imbalance.
John, your thoughts? John?
Well, my overall view is that China is in a relatively good shape getting into 2026. If you look at look at this from a international perspective, I think China's relationship with the United States is getting much better. China's relationship with the European Union, I think, is not going to be too much affected by the ongoing conflict. As a matter of fact, I think there's some prospect that this conflict in Ukraine is going to end next year. We have absolute peace in our region. Our relationship with the global south is very good. Chinese international trade cannot be better. We have a
So my
trillion-dollar
question
trade
rather is
surplus.
two-phased. One is how will China do its own homework well, and the other thing is how well China will contribute to the rest of the world. Can you do the
So-
latter one particularly? And before we go to another question.
Well, I think the biggest challenge for next year, for 2026, is really on the domestic side. I think we need to really put our acts together, try to deliver the best of economic performance for 2026. The real estate market has to be coming back a little bit, at least stop sliding further. Local government debt issue has to be addressed.
Which you
I
said
think
earlier
it's-
already in the program. So your argument seems to me is, as China's size is huge, doing its own things well can contribute to the rest of the world. Is that what you're trying to argue? It seems to me.
Absolutely. I
All
think
right.
most of the challenges for next year is going to be on the domestic side.
Okay, we're seeing a lot of initiatives brought up by China. Belt and Road Initiative, Rong Ying, you earlier mentioned. There's also others, Global Governance Initiative, Global Development Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative. These are not just documents. We see in different parts of the world, these documents are being intensely debated, what exactly they mean, how actions will help to implement these initiatives, and what could that be for the rest of the world? Now, Ying, generally speaking, we only have a few minutes to go. How will these initiatives further pave the way for China's approach with the rest of the world and contribute, if China can, to the international and global governance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the visions of building a community with shared future for humanity and the 4Gs global initiatives are very much important, supporting the implementation of the initiative. The question is, of course, how these grand visions have been translated into policies. We have seen, I think, efforts in the past, and particularly in 2025, in testing or practicing these initiatives. We have seen, for example, the Lantang-Mekong cooperation, the sub-regional cooperation. We have seen China and the Central Asia forums and others bilaterally, multilaterally, sub-regionally, and that need to be done, particularly when the experiences and the lessons are learned so that they could be properly sort of implemented to ensure these initiatives are going to deliver, is going to make difference to the challenge, to address the challenges, the problems we are facing.
Right,
altogether.
Mr. Hofman.
Well, so
We only have
I
1
think it's-
minute for you, if you can. Thank you.
It is very appreciated that China actually put their vision on paper. That's one. Second, finding very concrete aspects of implementing that vision is very important, be it in international organizations or, for instance, something not yet mentioned, providing more monetary support for the international organization. In other words, the internationalization of the renminbi, an important aspect that I think will happen in the next phase of China's rise.
All right, Peter, 30 seconds. Sorry, time is running out.
I think it's a very holistic vision. It's global civilization, development, security, governance. China's approach is entirely holistic, and this is the way forward to go, I think.
All right, I think we're wrapping up today's discussion as we are embracing the new year 2026. A lot of food for thoughts, a lot of questions to be answered, and certainly a lot of work to be done. Thank you so much for every one of you, your contribution. Bert, John, Peter, and Ying, Happy New Year to every one of you, and also Happy New Year to our audience.